Today's episode, I think, is a must for musicians to listen to because Bob Morrell goes into the type of things that actors struggle with, and for everything that he says about that, it applies directly to musicians as well. So there's lots of stuff on the in the show, which will be great from the point of view of how to be sort of entrepreneurial and the type of things that go wrong with business. Lots of stuff in the show notes. Check out what I'm doing on Patreon. Obviously your support is really good for me, but there's lots of things on there. Lessons, NLP, learning how to songwrite, stuff about the music charity as well. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Today I've got Bob Morrell on the programme. Hi Bob, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Vic. Nice
Good.
to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's good to see you too. I have a traditional first question, Bob, which is, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
That's a very good question. I heard that on one of your previous podcasts, so I thought, right, I better work out what it is I actually do. So I've written a little list here of things that I do occasionally do.
Cool.
So my job is that I run a training company, sales and management training company, and occasionally do podcasts as well. I am also a trained actor for my sins. I went to drama school many years ago. I'm a writer of work stuff and also creative writing. And as you will all know, Vic, occasionally I will pick up a microphone and sing as well.
Yes, that's true. Excellent stuff. Now, that's the first time that people have made a list of what they've done. So out of sort of over 100 and odd podcasts, you are the first to have prepped up.
That's great. Well, most people know what they're doing, you see, whereas I had to really think about it.
No, I would have said that, I wouldn't have, expected anything less than prep from you, Bob. So that's good.
Thank you.
So the acting. Let's talk about this. So that was the first thing you did. Is that am I correct on it?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about that.
Okay. So
how did you get interested?
I acted in loads of amateur stuff when I was younger. My mum was in a local drama group and I got involved in that. And I did stuff locally in Tunbridge Wells and other places with various theatre companies. And I enjoyed it. And it was also a very, very good way of meeting women as well, I found out. So that's quite a good motivator.
It is.
It is. And then I decided to go to drama school. And so I auditioned for all of the top drama schools and didn't get into any of them. And I eventually ended up going to a drama school in Oxford, which ironically is now a top drama school, but it wasn't in my day. But it was fine. I did 2 years there, met some great people. That's quite an enjoyable experience. I do have a sort of cautionary tale to tell people about drama school, but it was a great experience.
Right. So what's the cautionary tale then, Bob?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
You set me up.
I did. So I would never deter anyone from going to drama school if they wanted to go. Okay. I think it's a really great thing to do. You get your ego massaged for 2 or 3 years. You get to play parts that you are highly unlikely to ever play again professionally. So that is something you don't realize till it's done, but that is the truth. And you get to experience something which is very unique in terms of an educational experience. At the same time, when you come out, yes, out of a group of 30 students, 1 or 2 are going to be plucked from obscurity and may very well make a living just about in this precarious profession. But the vast majority, sadly, will struggle to make a living, will struggle to make anything. And I think that's the tough thing, which most people don't quite realize. It's not a passport. It's not a sort of easy way into the business. It is a way into the business, but it's also very tough. I met someone recently, and this is a very good example, who at the age of 49 got their big break in a West End show in London. So they've been in the business for a long time before they got that break. And not everyone can wait that long. No. And I think that's the difficulty with acting. There was a time when acting was pretty well paid, and it can be very well paid still. But sadly, I think in the lower levels, in the initial stages, it's still very poorly paid, and to actually make a living from it is a real struggle, I think.
So the thing is, I could take the word acting out of there and put musician. And yes. I would go, that's exactly the same.
That's the same. There's a chap that you and I probably knew, a guy called Tony Haygarth, who was an actor. And he was a dear friend of mine, and he was my best man actually at my wedding. And he said, if you're an actor and a musician, that's the best, because you can busk during the day and act in the evening. And if you haven't got an acting job, you can still work. And his thing was that you can always afford a drink if you're a musician. And I think that's probably very true. You know, if you can play a guitar and sit outside, you can earn 30 quid and buy yourself a drink, you know.
It's interesting actually, because one of my pupils became an actor and has done quite well for himself. But you know, he would totally agree with what you're saying. And actually, part of how he succeeded was the fact that he was also a good musician, because it does give you another perspective and depth to what you do. So I'm really interested in this, because obviously I have a lot of people who are interested in doing something with music and taking it further into making money. And of course, there's a slight problem, because with the arts, you often come into doing this as a job from a hobby. You know, there's not many people who become accountants because that's what they did in their spare time, because they just like adding things up. Because they'll probably end up in an institution if they did that. But you know what I mean? So with the arts, you tend to, that tends to be the thing that you end up thinking that you're going to do, but it's a hobby, and there's a mindset thing, which I think is slightly problematic. Well, it is problematic. And it's this sort of thing of, I want to do that thing that I really love, and somebody's going to pay me. And I think there is that, and obviously we're going to come on to this with regards to business, I'm sure, that people often have an idea that they've got something that they can sell, but they don't realize that they've got to sell it to somebody. They've got, you know, there's got to be a desire for that thing, or a need, or whatever, for people to go, there's your money. And that is, I think, at the crux of anything to do with money, isn't it? I think. So going back to the acting thing then, because I can see there's a great segue here from your acting to what it is that you do as your sort of main thing. So were you one of the one or two who got plucked from obscurity? Where were you in the listing?
Oh, way down. And that's a very good question. I'll give you an example. There was a girl in my class, in my year, who is now a film star. She became a film star a year out of drama school. So she was the one. Okay. And very talented person. I don't begrudge her at all. She's, she deserves it. Everybody else got little jobs, as I did, little get your equity card. I spent 9 months dressed up as a bloody giant in a theatre and education tour.
Right.
And you literally take anything.
Yes.
On £120 a week just to get your equity card.
Yeah.
And you do that work, you get your equity card, and then what? You think, where's the phone calls? Where's the offers? Where's the auditions? Mm. And it becomes really disheartening. Mm. And in my case, I wanted to get married and I wanted to have a normal life, and it's interesting. I think the word normal life and musician, actor, doesn't always work.
No.
Your weekends and your evenings are rarely your own. And that, I think that's very true. And so you then have to make a decision. Now, it's interesting. There is a debate that if you are relatively wealthy and you have some kind of private income, that actually you can afford to wait and hang around and be in the right place and buy a drink at the right bar and all that sort of thing. And eventually you might put yourself in that position. But not everyone is as fortunate as that. And I think that's a real shame that access to the arts has become harder and harder over time. I mean, when I went to drama school, it was £1,100 a term to go to drama school in the early 90s, which was a fortune at the time. Now it's the same drama school. I think it's something like £6,000 or £7,000 a term, £20,000 a year. It's serious money. So unless you can get government help from that, which is virtually, it's minimal, you are going to have to fund that. And even if you have a student loan, you're going to come out with the same kind of debt as a doctor. So the whole world has changed as far as that is concerned. And as you've made a very good point, the economics of it, the business side of it, is not something that's ever taught. Nobody taught us at drama school how to sell yourself. No one.
I tell you what, I've been banging on this drum for years with regard to like music colleges and all the rest of it, because the instruction that they give you is just rubbish. Really, what they should be teaching people is entrepreneurial skills, right? Yeah. Not about record companies and all the rest of it, because again, that's like winning the lottery. You've got to be able to. You've got to be able to go and find, first of all, what stuff you've got, your skills, if you like, and also be able to see what it is that's out there. So we're coming back to this same point. What is it that people want? And I've coached musicians on this over the years, and this idea of you can't turn your nose up at anything. So a lot of musicians turn their nose up at teaching, but I mean that is the safest. Well, I mean even that's questionable now because of everything that's going on. But you've got to have a wide range of possibilities about what you can do, and you can't limit yourself until you get to the point that you can limit yourself. So yeah, that's fascinating. Which, interestingly, you talk about the money involved now. Back in the day, and I'm sure this is true of acting as much as it is for music. So go back to the 60s, let's say, and the musicians were Kevin and Dave and Keith and whatever, right? And they were just ordinary working class people, right? And that, I would say, was probably true of many of the actors, apart from obviously the acting families.
Yeah.
And now you're getting kids, they've all been, loads of them have come from public schools, right?
Yeah.
Case in point, bands like Keen, right? And you think the whole demographic has changed. And whether that's changed when you could get, the free guitar lessons and the free violin lessons stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now it's, you can't, the choice is like, to take that route, you have to take another route. So coming back to you then, Bob, because these are fascinating points, really. It's really important, I think, for artists just generally. So you had a few bits, Dressed as a Giant and a few other things. Tantalizingly close to certain things, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And then what?
Well, then I decided I needed to get married, and I didn't drop it completely, but I just thought I needed a job and I needed some security. And so I took a job and I worked in advertising for many years, got married, and lived that life, and slowly worked my way up the ladder. And I occasionally had little forays into acting and joined a band and various other bits and pieces that I did. I always wrote, though. That was the one thing I continued to do, was write. But then I guess about 22 years ago, I had another friend who I was at drama school with, Jeremy, and we realized that we thought as actors we could be pretty good trainers. And we thought that actually there's not much difference between walking on a stage and acting than walking on in front of 50 people.
Exactly.
And performing a training session for them, making it entertaining and making it fun. So we formed a double act, which I think is pretty rare in the world of training. And we started doing that, and we started getting clients, and the clients got larger and larger. And over the last few years, we've trained tens of thousands of people in very, very large companies. And we have a team of people now that we do it with. But back then, it was us, a double act, a suitcase, horrible hotels, and we were on the road. And so for me, that was acting. Touring.
Yes.
That was acting.
Yes.
And I still see it as a performance now. So even now, 20 years on, before I go on in the morning, I sort of get a bit nervous and I prepare myself and I go on and I deliver this performance, which is what it is. And I'm very glad that we made that choice, because financially it's considerably better paid than a small part in the West End. It really is. And also it's bizarre, really. It's the sort of thing, as we've now learned 20 years on, which continues. And it's so bizarre. There's this, there's material we deliver now that we delivered 20 years ago, which is really odd. But it makes you realize that some things never get fixed, some things never change, some things are habitual. And so that makes it, and so every time you get a new audience, whilst it's very familiar to us, it's completely new to them. And you adapt it slightly and what have you, but that's what we do. We also do podcasts, of course, like this, and we do a double act podcast, and that's sometimes amusing, sometimes business related, sometimes training related, but sometimes we'll just talk about things that we saw. So we went to see Ian McKellen in Hamlet a few months ago, and we did a whole thing on that. And we'll reminisce about the early days. And that's great. At the same time, there is still a kind of a thing. So for years I thought, when I'm older, when I'm sort of 65, 70, I would love to be the guy there get in to be, or on telly, the guy who comes in with a tray of drinks,
Yes.
and delivers a sarcastic one-liner and buggers off. That would be a superb little thing to do when I'm older. I still feel that call to go back to it at some point. But there we are.
Oh, it could happen. These things can happen.
It could.
Yes. Yeah. Now, I see exactly what you're saying with regard to music, about getting up on a stage and playing, and those skills that you have to have from a musical playing point of view, about where are you on the stage? Where are you looking? What does the audience see? It's about presentation, isn't it? And how you can win an audience over. You seem to be breaking up a little bit, Bob, actually. I don't know whether that's...
Sorry, my Wi-Fi's fine.
Yeah, right.
It might be your end, is it?
It might be. It shouldn't be, because I'm in the office. But
I can hear you. I can't. You're not moving though. You're frozen on my screen for some reason.
Yeah. No, I'm back.
Got you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it could well have been me. No, I was just talking about the presentation things about being on stage.
Yes.
Things that you learn, which is just like second nature to you in the end. But of course, it's like a revelation to people that have never been involved in anything like that, and how you prepare yourself for playing, and even down to what you're wearing and how that changes your personality. So that's fascinating. So a couple of questions that you sort of skipped over, because you mentioned advertising.
Yes.
So that's to me, that's like somebody saying, I was into flower arranging, and then I decided to become a hitman. It's like, okay, what's the connection? So how did you get involved in advertising?
Because before I went to drama school, I worked in a media sales office, and I was relatively successful, completely untrained, I hasten to add. But I was pretty good at it. And my dad always said, oh, you've got the gift of the gab, you'll be fine. And he was right. I was a pretty good salesman. And so when I decided I wasn't making any money acting, I thought, well, I can easily go back into selling advertising again. And this time it would be more money, company car, all the various, bumflufferys that go with it. And so I just thought, well, I can do that. It's a relatively easy thing for me to do. I will say, though, that there is a line in one of my favorite TV programs, Peep Show, where they talk about media sales, and someone says, did you find that each day you did it, a bit of your soul died? And I would say, yes, it did. And so there is that thing where you just think, I cannot be enthusiastic about this. You learn a lot. You learn a lot about marketing. You learn a lot about different types of business. You learn how to have a nice lunch. That was what I did. And I realized there were certain things I enjoyed in life. And that's what I've tried to do in our business is, for me, if I couldn't do it if I didn't stay in a nice hotel, have a nice meal out, those sorts of things make it enjoyable. Otherwise, what's the point? And I think I learned a bit of that in advertising. It's all changed now, of course. Nobody goes for lunch anymore. It's all very controlled, sadly. And of course, nobody reads magazines much anymore.
No,
as they used
it's all
to.
very different now, isn't it?
It is. But it's still interesting that the issues that we had back then still exist. It's still the same question mark over what works, what doesn't work. What is going to attract people, and it's much harder than it used to be. So I'm glad I'm not dealing with that now. At the same time, this sort of thing and social media and podcasting and the way the internet has changed everything is much more interesting, and the way that it's more accessible now, I think, is more fascinating. So there we are.
So next question. So you said then you had a conversation with Jeremy, and it was like, well, let's go and do corporate training or whatever, right?
Yep.
And again,
Yep.
that's a little bit like now the hitman saying, well, I've done that. I'm now going to get a submarine and become a, it's like something else. So how did you, how did you get the clients? Because that's another world, surely, unless you've got connections with your advertising.
No, not really.
No, I was going to say, because this is what
fluke. Yeah.
So
it was all a complete fluke. Well, we did two different things. We started off training, but we also started off selling other things on the side. We started selling marketing plans as a kind of a income generator. It was a strange thing for a few years. And then we started getting, through a few of our connections, we got a couple of small gigs, but nothing major. And then one day we met a newspaper advertising salesperson who was useless. I mean, absolutely useless. And so we phoned up their boss and said, look, we're not going to say who we've just met, but it was so bad, we're confident we can come in and train your people and make them better. Right. And he went, yeah, let's do it. And that kicked us off in the right direction.
That is fantastic. That is brilliant. So
it was lucky.
Well, most other people would have ignored that. I mean, how many times do you have somebody that you deal with? It could be a problem that you've had with something or other, your washing machine broke down or something like that. And what you receive as their so-called customer service is absolutely diabolical. It's frequent. But nobody does what you did, which is phone the boss. That's fantastic.
Yeah. But then there comes a point sometimes, I mean, we still sometimes do it now. We get calls with people trying to sell us stuff. And it's so bad. And you just think, are you honestly spending all day ringing people up with that level of pitch? I had it the other day when I walked outside of Sainsbury's in Headcorn, and somebody was trying to sell, charity contributions. Yeah. And I'd really feel sorry for those people, because they have to stop every single person that goes by, and their hit rate must be something like 1 in 200. Like it can't be any more than that. Yeah. And I wanted to say to this person, look, your opening is wrong. Don't just stop me. You've got to have a decent question. You've got to have something that's going to make me feel diverted. You've got to do something creative with your opening, or you're never going to get anybody interested. Now, of course, I haven't got time to sit and train every person you speak to, but sometimes you just think, why are people pushed into these roles in the hope that they're going to be quite good? Why not just give them a little bit of training to really be good at it? And it's the same with contact centers. We've all had to, at the moment, we're all ringing up energy firms trying to renegotiate our pricing. And the service is dreadful. And, why is that? Why can't we have people on the phone who can make decisions,
because you always end up going around in that sort of, that circle. And I've had this with car insurance. I've had it with all manner of things where somebody couldn't work out why something was on a database. And you said, well, somebody put it on there. But it was like, well, it's not us. It must be this person. Then you contact this, and it's, well, no, it's to do with it. And in the end, I eventually, after virtually a day on the phone, one person went, I think I can sort this for you. Hang on. And it was like, oh my God. It was like suddenly an angel appeared, You got a problem with that? I can sort that out. Just give me a moment. Oh. It's incredible. And it's got worse.
It is.
I think it's got worse.
But you see, we always say, as long as it's bad, there's work for us.
Yes.
If people started sorting it out, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But, we hear, and the interesting thing is, every person we speak to thinks that their situation is unique.
Yes.
So you go into a company and they go, well, the problem with us is because we're so niche and that's why we're different. You listen to it and you think, it's nothing.
It's the same.
It's just the same stuff. It's the same stuff again and again. If you get it right, the customers have a better experience, you make more money. You get it wrong, they have a worse experience, you make less money. It's not that complex, but it is, in well, in some ways it's good. It's a universal issue that, we'll keep on working with. But
So-
one day you hope they'll fix it.
Yeah. Now, well, they might not, because it might be, as you say, human nature that you start, they are the same problems again and again and again. So
Yeah.
what would you say are the type of key things you sort of go, look, there's this?
Well, I'll give you a great example. So if you go into a shop to look for some clothing, and I know that you occasionally like quite outlandish clothing, Vic.
Funny you should say that.
Yeah. So if you're out on a Saturday and you wander into a shop, as you do, as is your wont, you just sort of stagger in. You know that somebody at some point is going to say, "Can I help you?" Or, as they generally say, "Can I help you?" They don't even form the words anymore.
No.
You're right there. You're right. And so, what do we say? What's our natural response to that?
No, thanks. Well, I'm fine, thank you. I'm just looking.
No thanks, just looking. No thanks, just looking. Right. So we've all been trained to say that. So why the hell do people keep on saying, "How can I help you?" when nobody wants any service? And if they do want service, then we say things like, "Well, look, I don't want to buy anything. I'm just thinking about da da da." So we then set the agenda for the rest of the conversation if we want to respond. And so that is a classic example of habitual habit over 150 years, really, of people asking that question. It is the wrong question. And of course, nobody trains anyone. And so that's the first thing, how you open things up. The next bit really is asking a few questions. Wouldn't it be lovely if you said, "Well, I'm thinking of getting a new jacket." Now, most people go, "Well, let's go to the jackets." What they should say is, "Well, what's the jacket for?" "Well, I'm in a band." "Aha. And what sort of band is it?" "Rock and roll." "And so what sort of gigs are you doing?" "Well, we're doing quite big gigs on large stages in front of hundreds of people." "Great. And what are the other people in the band wearing?" "Well, they're wearing this, that, and the other." If somebody bothered to ask those questions, you'd go, "God, this is amazing." And then they go, "Right, well, from everything you've told me, this over here looks like a perfect jacket for you." "Wow, that's good." It's such simple stuff. It's not that difficult.
No.
But most people would rather leave you to look and browse and consider yourself and select rather than help you to buy. And that's often the case. And you can transfer that to the phone. We now do web chat, where everyone goes onto web chat and does that. We've got virtual contact centers. That'll be the next thing, by the way. So there's going to come a point where you'll ring up and they'll say, "Right, I'll send you a link on your phone," and you'll click on it and you'll see the person you're speaking to, like this. So you'll see that person and you will have a face-to-face interaction. Now, some companies are really worried about that because they don't want you to see their staff.
No.
Because then they can't do the "I'll check with my manager" thing, and there's of course there's an invisible manager, there's no one there. So but even so, those principles are the same, and that's what we're trying to sort of shake people up and say, look, it's just a habit. Change the habit, and you'll change the result. You'll change the conversation, and that will continue to evolve as time goes on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely on the nail with this, because I do remember you saying about this to me once, and you said they actually say "kelp you," which is and you think, because people do that. I can something about clothes shops. There was a really good shop in Bath, which was an Italian family ran it. You went in there and somebody would come up and go, "I love your shirt. Where'd you get that from?" And of course, this was somebody serving, right?
Yeah.
You had a conversation.
That's it.
And then, and before you know it, you're saying yes to things and have, all the rest of it. And then they start to go about, what they've got that would go with your shirt. and so on.
Yeah.
And those, going back to this thing about the acting and how training is done, and and the same thing about musicians and whatever. No one tells a musician about how to communicate with somebody who, even just how do you get a gig in a pub?
Yeah.
That's never taught.
No.
How do you communicate with the director or whatever, the casting director? Even if you don't get the part, you want people to remember who you are.
Definitely.
But that's never taught, is it?
No. And in fact, that's a very interesting point, that at no point do they say this is how you walk in and conduct yourself at an audition.
Yeah.
These are the sorts of questions you should ask. This is the interest you should show. This is a good tactic to make people want you. There's none of that. And that's why a lot of people get chewed up and spat out of these things, because they're just not ready for it. It reminds me what you were saying about getting a gig in a pub. There's a great story about the comedian Peter Kay, who, when he first started in the business, he was going out to pubs doing half-hour gigs for 20-25 quid. And he was earning less than that to do an evening working at Manchester Arena as a marshal. It was low hourly rate. And he said he remember once a pub landlord phoned him and said, "Could you come and do a gig at our pub?" And he said, "Okay, how much is it?" And the guy went, 30 quid. And he went, 30 quid? And the guy went, all right, 35. And he thought he was negotiating.
Yeah.
But just, he was actually amazed it was 30 quid. And so that was the thing where, because you've got no experience in this, but of course the landlord knows he's going to take way more than 30 quid on the bar if he's got a decent comedian in, but we don't calculate that. We don't think about that. And I think that's, for some people, that's a very hard thing to get their head around.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story that happened to me, which is very similar. The millennium.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So somebody contacts me who I taught their daughter. And he had a business. I didn't know what he did or anything like that, particularly. And he said, "Oh, I'm doing this thing, selling tickets for the millennium." And I'm like, okay. And this, at the time, this was one of the sort of incarnations of Red Touch. So it was quite a big band, and had a big sort of name for itself and all the rest of it. And depending on what the situation was, we'd shrink the band down to a small combo, or, if people were going to give us some money, we'd stick brass section in and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
he said about this, and I thought, well, first of all, I wasn't sure how many of the band members were going to be around. So, and he was, somebody I sort of knew, and he said, "So how much?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, 5." Oh. So he went, "Yeah, okay then. So we'll do it for $5,000." And it was like, okay. Because when I said 5, I was sort of thinking 500 quid. Because it's a friend, and I don't know what it's, So yeah, so I said, "Yeah, 5," and he went, "Yeah, $5,000." So that just goes to show, again, because I was slightly sort of reticent, a bit like Peter Gay, sort of going like, "What?" Shocked that he's going to get an extra $5 for the night, and he ends up, the guy sort of making it more,
But I think that's a great thing, because there's that old saying, you determine your worth.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good one, because
Bob, that is so true. That is so true. Yes.
And at that point, you were worth that to him, to play that gig on that night.
Yes.
And so we don't know. And I think very often we make assumptions about people, about what they can afford, about what they've got, about what's valuable to them. And I think, guitars are a very good example. So our house is full of guitars now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you've got lots of guitars.
What?
So I reckon I can justify the purchase of any guitar pretty much up to a certain level to myself, because I'm enthusiastic about it. My son's enthusiastic about it. I can build that up. Other people would think, well, I'd never spend that kind of money on guitars, but that's them. And so I think there's that thing about value. Unless you actually know what something means to someone, how can you determine what it's worth? And I think that's the same with the individual. If you think about musicians, actors, I think many would exist on next to no money because they're doing what they love.
Yes.
And yet, if you ask them to determine their worth, of course they're worth more. Of course they're worth way more than that. Their talent has a value, but unfortunately, it's very hard for that individual to create that value. You need enablers to help you do that.
Right, that's a really good point. So this is within the guitar teaching community, and there's a lot of people who listen to this who are from that type of thing, and I'll make a big point of this when this goes out, right? They've got this thing of, well, you couldn't charge that here, wherever it is, and that place seems to be everywhere, because there was always somebody who says you can't charge that here because people can't. But I have seen, with clever focusing about what it is that you're going to get from this. I think the best story was a guy who great guitar player who lives out in Malta, and he's a teacher and very well respected. And I went out there to do some examining, and he said to me, so what's the going rate for guitar lessons in the UK? And I said, well, come on, it's whatever people want to charge, basically. I mean, some people are charging this, some people are charging that. He said, okay. So he said, do you know what the going rate is in Malta? So this is going back about 8 years ago. I said, don't know. He said, £4 an hour. Right? I went, really? I said, okay, cost of living and all the rest of it is much lower here. £4 an hour. So this guy has got 2 shops that he's bought from, through his teaching. So I looked puzzled, and he said, he said, what I do is I get 10 people together and I charge them all £4 an hour.
Exactly right. Yeah.
He said, so when I get people contact me and from wherever it is, and as I say, it could be anywhere, but it's often, people up north, people in Wales, people wherever, in the West Country, you can't charge that here. It's like, well, is your going rate £4 an hour? Because as you say, it's a perception thing.
It is. And actually, there's also this, there's also another perception, of course, which is some things are worth the money.
Yes.
And I think in life, as you get older, you realize that certain things are worth the money. And it takes you a while to come to terms with that. And there's not many, but those things that are, that's it, are definitely worth the money. And sometimes it's an experience because that's memorable and it lives with you, and I get that. Sometimes it is a product. Now, I don't mind sharing with you. During lockdown, we got a dog, as many other people did. We've got this beautiful hound. And so I needed a new pair of boots. And you can buy a pair of wellies for a tenner, but I didn't. I spent, I'm embarrassed to say this, £180 on a pair of wellies, right?
Okay.
Now, why did I do that? What's the reason for spending that sort of money? A, I'm probably a bit stupid, but B, these are not any old wellies. These are wellies made with the same material as they make wetsuits with, inside.
Yeah.
So in the sub-zero temperatures, when I'm walking my dog in the winter, I'm warm, I'm dry, they are super comfortable, and I'm using them twice a day. So why would I buy 10 pairs of £10 wellies, whereas actually I'm just going to get one pair and they're going to last me for years? Now, someone's done a good job on me. I accept that. But I think in life, there are things that you think it's worth it. To me, it's worth it. It might not be worth it to others, but it's worth it to me now. There are loads of other things I would never spend that kind of money on. But, my son walks in with a new guitar and I go, how much was that? Okay, fair enough. I can easily justify that because I'm enthusiastic. We've been buying these Yamaha FGs, got one here. That we bought a couple of these, 1971, I think this one is, because they sound fantastic for the money. They're like 300 quid. I mean, if I saw one of these lying around, I wouldn't be able to stop myself. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I know it very well. I know that feeling. For the women out there, it's like shoes.
Totally.
You can't have enough shoes. So and you have to have a guitar that goes with the jacket that you bought. And you know that one. So
yes.
We did a spell of being in the same band, which was great fun. Back in the day. Yeah,
I miss it hugely.
Yeah, so do I actually, because I'm not really doing very much in that sort of way at the moment. And that was good fun. It was an interesting little project. And I think that's one of those things, isn't it? That this must be true when you get a good sort of cast of actors working on a long sort of run of a show. It becomes like a family, or it becomes a thing that you do. And I think, again, it's difficult to see that in any other working environment.
No. I think there's an instinct that comes with it. So when you're with a good band that you know and you've rehearsed, it's amazing the innate connection that you have, especially when you're performing. So I remember loads of gigs where we were playing a popular song, and we would just say, we'll just play the fucking thing again, because everyone's dancing, and you just go again, and no one bats an eyelid, and they just do it, and it's just that wonderful feeling, because everyone just goes, hey, and off they go again. When it's at that level, there's nothing better. And I've had it a few times in my life actually, where I've gone up on stage to sing a song with a band that I didn't know, and they're good because they just come in and it just works. And there's that kind of that connection. The feeling of being supported by a band is so amazing. Even in a tiny gig, even in a jazz club, whatever it may be, a decent pianist, to have that connection is one of the best feelings. Now, in acting, you have a load of people in an ensemble cast. There's a lot of practical jokes. There's lots of in jokes. There's lots of things that happen on stage to make it bearable, especially if you're on a long run. But also there is a certain sadness that comes with acting, because inevitably it's going to end at some point. I think the great thing about being with a band is that audience feedback, it's however often you play, that's it. That's what you get. You know you're going to get that reaction. I saw the Stones a few years ago in Coventry when Charlie Watts was still alive, and I'd seen them once before, and I have to say, for men of that age, it was absolutely phenomenal what they achieved on that stage. I saw Mick Jagger in his late 70s run from one side of the stage to the other at a full sprint and then sing a song. I couldn't have done that. The man is unbelievable. And I just think sometimes to have that comfort, they know that Charlie's on the drums, he's spot on. They know that Keith's coming in. They know Ronnie's got the solo. It's an incredible safety that they have, of course they're not going to bother to stop. Why would they ever stop? As
No.
long as they've got that solidity, you may as well keep going, because it makes people happy and makes them happy, I'm sure.
Yes, of course it does. I mean, there was a conversation. I can't remember where this was. It might have been in the Keith Richards's autobiography, when he recounts, you know, in the early days with Mick, and Mick says, "How long do you think we could, you know, last for? 3 years?
Yeah.
4 years?
Yeah.
And then have to go and do something else, right?" But it's, and I think the interesting thing, again, this takes it back to the original conversation that we, you know, how we started off. They didn't go into it to make money.
No.
And I'm just wondering whether that is something that we've got wrong now. That if you go into it because it's the thing that you do, that is what you do. And okay, you might have to have a job on the side in order to do that thing that you do.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking that everything has to be monetized, if you get it right, then you can get the money.
I think you need to have some kind of idea. I think you need to have some kind of strategy.
Yes.
So
yes.
I know that Ken Branagh, when he started as an actor, he came out of drama school without any work, and he formed his own company, and he put on his own production and borrowed some money and cast himself in the lead, and off he went. Now, you've got to have some brass balls to do that.
Yes.
But in the same vein, you know, it's with acting. There's a great book by David Mamet where he says, just do it. Just put it on yourself. Get together with some other actors, scrape a bit of money together. There's plenty of empty theatres. Just find one that has a few free hours. You can sell tickets, do a deal with them, with the owner, and just start doing it. Just start producing stuff, and then people will come to you.
Yes.
And I think sometimes that's the thing, by being active and being proactive, your head starts to rise above the parapet. And if you're an agent or a manager or a producer or a casting director, wouldn't you rather work with someone who is being proactive and keen? A good lesson, which you're never taught.
Exactly. We froze there, but I caught what you were saying. So just one little story, just before we wrap up, which epitomizes that. I was in a band, the first sort of successful, you know, project, really. I had, the second one, really. But there's a band called Bravura, which was a sort of a reggae fusion rocky thing. So it's a bit like The Police meets The Clash meets Bob Marley, right? Or Black Uhuru. So I found a cassette of the last gig. And we'd been together for like 5 or 6 years, and we'd had, you know, lots of airplay all across the country, hot hit on Radio Caroline and all that sort of stuff, you know, we played some decent gigs and stuff like that. And it sort of fell apart because, unfortunately, it was me really that caused it to dissolve, but I won't go there. Anyway, it was interesting listening to this recording because lots of it I'd forgotten, and I'd forgotten how good the band were. And the guy who mastered it had toured with us, you know, so he knew us really well. And I said to him when he was mastering it from cassette to digital, how good is it? Meaning like the recording quality. He said, amazing. I thought, no, I mean, you know, I said, does it sound good? And he went, fantastic. The band, I forgot how good they were. So I got this thing, and it was weird because one of the guys is dead now, and hearing his voice and everything made me feel rather sort of, you know. But the interesting story about this was that that attitude was exactly how we were. We put things on and just literally throw ourselves in and, you know, put on a gig at the Orchard Theatre. And we were like 22. You know, we'd hire the Orchard Theatre and put a gig on. Or the Stag Theatre or Chatham Central Hall. So we really pushed ourselves and took risks, like really dire risks. But we did a single and we got it recorded, you know, a little studio down in Sheppey, and they, you know, ran off 500 copies or whatever, and they were just the, you know, vinyl singles. And they said, for an extra, I don't know, 50 quid or something, we'll run off some other singles, you know, because once you do a run, you can run off some extras, and we'll send them off to some radio stations. And we just thought, oh, okay. Didn't think anything of it. Because, you know, we were, although we were enthusiastic, we weren't sort of stupid, you know. So we did this. And eventually the BBC pick up a copy of this.
Brilliant.
And we get a phone call from a guy called Mike Brill, who ran, it was only a sort of local BBC, but he said, I'll bring the BBC mobile out and record you.
Wow. Brilliant.
So we put a concert on. I think it was the Stag, but it could have been Chatham Central. I can't remember now. But anyway, I think it was the Stag because it's easy to get in and out and mobile. Anyway, this is the classic thing. We made some money with selling the tickets. That wasn't the problem. But the BBC paid us.
Brilliant.
And the amount of money they paid us, almost to the penny, well, almost to the pound, was what the single cost us to record and press. And you go, and we just thought at the time, that is weird. We could have just given everything away and we would have got our money back.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. That's the sort of thing you just have to make it happen.
Yeah.
Great stuff, Bob. So
very good.
I'll put some stuff on the show notes for people so they can contact you. Is there anything you've got in particular you've got happening at the moment? You sort of think, this is the thing we're doing.
Not hugely. We have a podcast called Bob and Jeremy's Conflab, which is sometimes business related, but sometimes art related. Some of them are comedic, so people might enjoy that. And if anybody's interested in ebooks, there are a number of ebooks written by Bob Morrell on Kindle, some of which are business related, some of which are short novellas that I've written. They're a bit saucy, but what the hell?
What?
So if you fancy a bit of that, then
who would have guessed?
And one of them is a true story of an experience at drama school. I won't say any more, but it is quite funny. So there you go.
Gosh. And on that bombshell. So it was lovely talking to you, Bob. It's been a while.
And you, Vic. And you, absolutely. Really,
always a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Always a pleasure. All right. Speak to you soon.
Bye.